Thank you. Just a simple correction, around 24, 25 million, the population of Yemen. And it's very hard to come and try and fill in the great shoes of all the amazing women before me, but I'll try. And I know you might be a little bit hungry because this is just about before lunch, so bear with me. I was introduced to you as an editor of the Yemen Times, but I'd like to come and tell you that I consider myself as a queen. And it might be a little bit suitable since my husband keeps calling me the queen of the moon. But why not? It's a state of mind after all. And as it is, Yemen is the land of queens. Queen of Sheba is only one example. But unfortunately, the land of queens is not so happy anymore. Or at least for the last 3 decades or more, we've been suffering a lot. And some of the statistics that you just heard are very appalling. Like, for example, if I use my colleagues here and the 3 beautiful women to that left, it's 1 in 3 women in Yemen have adequate health care. So that means if one of these 3 women, if all the 3 women needed health care, only one of them would be able to go to the doctor. And talk about maternal care in specific, you have only around 40% of the women have deliveries or under adequate medical supervision. And I don't mean a hospital, I just mean a midwife. And if you want to talk about education, it's 1 in 2 women. So in every 2 women here in the room, for example, if they were in Yemen, only one of them would be educated and the other one would not. And I'm not talking about the older generation. I'm also talking about women who are, or young girls between the ages of 6 to 14 who should be in schools. 35% of them are not. So that means if, let's say, take 100 girls and say, of these 100 girls, how many will be in school? You will have 65. Now, and the numbers decrease as they grow up because of various cultural and religious and economic reasons, and even sometimes logistic, like the school could be far away. Of these 65 girls, only around 60% make it until high school. So from the 65, we reach 39. And from these 39, forget about college. College is like way far-fetched. But even then, from the 39 girls who actually make it to high school, you get a percentage of, say, 60 or even less than that who make it to education, higher education. So eventually we have 20 girls. So of the 100 girls we started off, we have only 20 who graduate from college. And then it gets a little bit better after that because the labor market is a bit more absorbing and you have the girls being recruited more, I suppose, than the males. And the unemployment is a bit less than 20% for girls compared to more than 40 for boys. And so let's say 16 of these 20 girls get a job. And the boys of my country complain. They keep saying that the women are taking their jobs. I suppose if they go to work on time and they do what they're told, they will get the jobs as well. But then there is a change that's happening in my country, and it's a positive one, because more and more girls are being empowered. And there are stories. I want to explain to you something because I know it. I am a journalist and I am in touch with my community. I want to share with you the story of Bushra. Bushra is a Yemeni girl who comes from an area called Hajja, which is rural, sort of. And in her society, girls don't go to school. Or if they go, I mean, they cannot continue. She's very hardworking and she loves education. So what happened is that in her 7th grade, she ran home to her father saying, I got high grades, full marks. And she was so happy, and she shared this with her dad. And her father was like, what? You're in the 7th grade? You can't be. Halas, no more school. He didn't even realize that his daughter was growing up so quickly. And like many men, unfortunately, in Yemen, they're not really in touch with their society, with their family, and following up exactly where they are at, with their boys or girls generally. And then he said, no more school for you. That was the reward she got for having full marks. But then Bushra is a very smart girl, and she doesn't take no for an answer. So what she did is that with her mother's support, she managed to get an agreement with the school so that she would go only for exams. And she managed, and she completed high school. And Bushra, after that, decided, what is the next step? For her, it was college. So what she decided to do is that she would try and sort of convince her family, one way or the other, especially her father, that he would allow her to go to college. College is just, it's in the other city. So it's two problems. One is the concept itself, and the other problem is the logistics of how will you allow your daughter to go to a different city, live on her own or in a hostel, and try and accommodate all these expenses. And her father is a farmer, so he wasn't rich anyway. When the question came about college, it was a definite no. Then she said, okay, then just help me get an ID. Bushra just wanted a piece of plastic paper that says who she was and with her picture on it. She knew that to get to college, she needed first to get an ID. And so she said, she reached a compromise with her dad, and she said, okay, help me get an ID, and I forget about college. But to get an ID, that means also they had to travel to the city. And what happened is that he said, I have no money, and I'm not willing to pay for the expenses and everything. So what she did is that she tutored the kids in her village for a little money, and for some time, she managed to get money and she took her father to the city, and they got her ID. She came back, she tutored the kids for another year, and during that, she shared some of the money with her family. So she actually contributed to her family. Next year, when it was time to register for college, Bushra came back again, and she said, I need to go to school. I need to go to college. And her father was like, okay, if it means more money. And they reached a compromise, and the way she says it, it's one battle at a time. And today she's in her third year, but I know she will go far. But not all the stories are so happy. Although there are so many Yemeni women who are extremely strong and brave. The story of Hannah is a bit more distressing. Hannah is a girl from Hodeidah, which is a coastal area. And when she was 12, around 12 years old, she was late coming from school. Her father was a cruel person. And he was angry, why is she late, and so on. And he found her playing in the neighborhood. So he decided, I don't want this girl, she's bad, she's evil, and so on. And he tied her to a pole, street light. And he asked people who were passing by to spit on her. And he said she's evil, devil, things like that. And he didn't want her to go back home. The local guardian, or what we call Aqil al-Hara, so it's the person in charge of the neighborhood, realized that she's become his responsibility. But he wasn't better anyway. So he took her to his house and prevented his family from dealing with her. He locked her up in a room, and he was worried that her immorality would infect his own family. At the age of 14, they decided to marry her off to a crippled man because nobody else would take her. And the crippled man, knowing her history, believing that she was an immoral girl, used her for prostitution. At the age of 15, Hannah just couldn't take it anymore. Almost 3 months pregnant, didn't know the father, she just ran away from home. And she hitchhiked her way to Sana'a, to the capital city. She slept in the streets, and the police found her in one of the parks in Sana'a. And the good news is that the police at the time received a training on human rights, and they were sensitized to deal with violence against women. And so they realized instead of taking her to prison like they used to, what they will do is that they took her to a shelter, one of 3 shelters in Yemen, and the only one in Sana'a. In the shelter, the director, I knew that because I followed her story and I wrote a report on it at the time. The director said she came to us and she was like in rags and looking miserable, but her eyes were glass. I mean, there was no life behind them. And so the lady, the manager of the shelter, she knew what to do, so she just hugged her and embraced her for a very long time. And it took maybe half an hour until the girl broke down and wept. And everybody in the room was weeping, and it was an amazing healing opportunity for everybody there. And she started telling her story and talking about it. And they gave her psychological support, even education and things like that. And some of the courses that they have there is to find out whatever talents you have and then try and encourage you to study or to profession them so that you can perfect them so that you can have a profession. And Hannah was very good at making some Yemeni cakes, some sort of what we call bint al-sahn. And the director of the school realized that what she can do is that she can try and market this. So there was a wedding at the time, and they paid for the eggs and the milk and butter and things like that. And Hannah made her cakes, and they sold them. And then the first time, they gave her her share of the money after cutting the costs. And then the director tells me that the time when Hannah held the money in her hand, she stared at it for a very long time, and she was silently crying. And they said, "What's wrong?" "It's the first time I hold money, let alone it's my money." She's never held, she was around, I think, 17 at the time. She's never held money in her hands. Sorry to the baby, she got an abortion. I don't know how you feel about that, but just to tell you if somebody was wondering. And seeing the money, they asked her, "So how do you feel?" She said, "I feel strong." And from that time, Hannah has become able, she's an income generator. Even her family tried to connect with her. Her father wanted her back now that she is earning, and I'm sure she said no. I don't know where she is at now, but I think she's done well. Now, the situation for Yemeni women is like that. Now we are at a situation where we're trying to improve our life, especially economic independence. That's the #1 key that can empower women. Let me try and take you as an example, what is Yemen going through right now, and what is it like? Imagine a house or a room where all the women of Yemen are in. I think it'll be difficult to have 14 million women in one room, but humor me. Let's say there's a room and the women are there. There are glass windows that you cannot open. There's a door, but the door is a little bit ajar, sort of. And the women inside the room have reading materials, and there are like books and things that tells them no better place than home, and this is women should stay inside. And through the glass, the women can see mostly men in the outside world. But they're not sure, should they go, should they stay? And consider this. There is always that one brave woman who's ready to defy stereotypes, who's ready to try out something else. So within the room, you find Bushra and Hannah and so on. And this woman just manages to go through this crack in the door, and she runs so fast and so hard, and she reaches so far because she feels liberated. And imagine this, women inside are like looking at her and saying, maybe I can too, maybe I can too. And then gradually, one by one, the women keep running so fast, and some of them come back, look at the window and say, like, come with us. And consider that like there's some sort of support group outside, and people trying to plan and dig a tunnel underground, and Shawshank Redemption or something like that, trying to get the women outside, or think of how it is. But there's also the counter story. There are the men outside who've been alarmed. They're saying more women are here, and there are women inside that are worried. Our traditions, our norms, what are we going to do? We have to keep the women inside. So there are women pulling the women out in. There are men trying to close the door, and there are other men trying to support women and pull them out. There are women from the outside who are trying to push women in because they feel competition. So they don't want more women on the outside world, otherwise they wouldn't be so unique. So you have all these dynamics, and this is where we are at now. And the door cannot be closed again, because women have put their foot in that space. It's called a foothold, I think. And then I think we managed to break a window or two. It's where we are at now. And this is why it's so important to have role models. It's so important to have women on the outside who are successful, and who the other women inside the room can see and say, I can relate to that, I can be that. I think Yemen is going to be a great country in the next 10 years, and the statistics I told you about are going to change very dramatically. And I hope that we're going to be queens all over again. Thank you.